Imagine this. You are a single mother. You have worked extra shifts, saved every penny, and finally afforded a dream vacation for you and your 2 little girls. A cruise. Sun, sea, smiles, and lasting memories. But then, in the blink of an eye, your world collapses. Your daughters vanish from the ship.
No trace. No explanación.
For 10 months, you live in a fog of desperation and unanswered questions. Then, one day, a phone call changes everything. A suitcase has washed up on a beach, and inside is something no parent should ever have to see. This is the true story of Rachel Marin. Except it isn't true. It's a nightmare that became real for one mother, and what she discovered would expose a dark underworld most people don't even want to believe exists. Let's go back to the beginning. Rachel Marin lived in a modest home in Charlottesville, Virginia. She wasn't rich, but she was rich in love. Her twin daughters, 8-year-old Millie and Rayleigh, were her entire world. They had the same bright eyes, the same contagious laughter, and the same habit of finishing each other's sentences. Rachel worked long hours as a medical assistant, often picking up weekend shifts just to make ends meet. But she had a dream. She wanted to give her girls an experience they would never forget. So she saved and saved until she could book a week-long Caribbean cruise. The day they boarded the massive ship, the twins were bursting with excitement. They ran from the buffet to the pool, from the kids' club to the arcade. Rachel watched them, her heart full. This was why she worked so hard. This was the joy she had fought for. For the first 3 days, everything was perfect. They swam, they watched magic shows, they ate too much ice cream. The girls made friends with other children on board. Rachel took hundreds of photos. She remembers thinking, "This is the best decision I ever made." Then came day 4. It was just past 3 in the afternoon. The girls had been swimming in the main pool, and now they were hungry. Rachel took them to a small restaurant on deck 7, a quiet place that served burgers and fries. They sat at a table near the window, looking out at the endless blue ocean. The twins chattered about the dolphin show they had seen that morning. At 3:30 p.m., Rachel's phone rang. It was her boss from the clinic back home. The reception was terrible inside the restaurant. She looked at her daughters, who were busy drawing on napkins. "I'll be right back," she said. "Stay here. Don't move. I'm just outside." They nodded. They were good girls. They always listened. Rachel stepped outside onto the deck. The signal was better there. She talked for 5 minutes, maybe 6. When she walked back into the restaurant, the table was empty. The napkins with the drawings were still there. The half-eaten burgers were still there. But Millie and Rayleigh were gone. At first, Rachel didn't panic. She thought they had gone to the restroom together. They did that sometimes. She checked the ladies' room. Empty. She checked the nearby arcade. Empty. She checked the pool area, the kids' club, the gift shop. Nothing. Then the panic began. She found a crew member and screamed that her daughters were missing. Within minutes, the ship's security team was alerted. An announcement was made. The entire vessel went into lockdown. Passengers were asked to stay in their cabins while crew members searched every inch of the ship. They checked behind curtains, under beds, inside storage closets. They knocked on every stateroom door, even the ones that were supposed to be unoccupied. Nothing. The ship's CCTV footage was reviewed for hours. The cameras showed the twins watching a juggler near the pool around 3:15 p.m. When the crowd dispersed, the girls walked toward the indoor corridor that led to the restaurant. But then they simply disappeared from view. It was as if the ocean had swallowed them. The U.S. Coast Guard was notified. The FBI got involved. Port authorities at every stop along the cruise route were alerted. But the ship had already left the previous port, and the next stop was still 2 days away. Investigators interviewed every passenger. They checked IDs, took statements, and searched luggage. No one saw anything suspicious. The cruise line insisted that their security protocols were top-notch. But the fact remained. 2 8-year-old girls had vanished from a floating city, and no one knew how or why. Rachel spent the remaining days of the cruise in a haze of grief. She barely ate. She barely slept. She walked the decks at all hours, calling her daughters' names until her voice gave out. Other passengers whispered behind her back. Some said the girls must have fallen overboard. Others speculated that they had been kidnapped when the ship docked briefly in the Bahamas. A few even suggested that Rachel herself might be involved. But the detectives who interviewed her saw a broken mother, not a criminal. When the cruise ended, Rachel returned to her quiet home in Charlottesville. The house felt like a tomb. The twins' bedroom still had their pajamas on the floor. Their toothbrushes were still in the bathroom. Rachel couldn't bring herself to move anything. She spent her days staring at missing persons flyers, rereading police reports, and calling Detective Mace Alvarez every week for updates. There were no updates. Weeks turned into months. Tips came in, sightings in Florida, in Texas, even in Mexico, but every single one led to a dead end. Rachel stopped opening her mail because most of it were sympathy cards she couldn't bear to read. She stopped adjusting the blinds because sunlight made the emptiness more visible. She stopped cooking because there was no one to cook for. 10 months passed. Then, on an ordinary Tuesday, her phone rang. The screen said, "Detective Alvarez." Rachel answered with a trembling voice. "Any news?" Detective Alvarez's voice was different this time. It was tight, controlled, and underneath that professional calm, there was something Rachel had never heard before. "Unease, I've just received information from the police department in Ocracoke, North Carolina," he said. "A local fisherman found a suitcase washed up on the beach. Inside, there are remains. We believe they may belong to one of your daughters." Rachel's world tilted sideways. She gripped the edge of her coffee table. "What?" The word was barely a whisper. "I can't explain everything over the phone," Alvarez continued. "We're flying to North Carolina together. The suitcase also contains personal items that we need you to identify. I'll pick you up in an hour." Rachel hung up. She looked at the sympathy cards on her table. Then she stood up, walked to her bedroom, and packed a small bag. Her hands were shaking, but her mind was strangely clear. After 10 months of darkness, she was finally going to get an answer. Even if that answer destroyed her. The flight to North Carolina was silent. Rachel stared out the window, watching the urban sprawl give way to coastal plains. Detective Alvarez sat beside her, reviewing case notes on his tablet. He didn't try to make small talk. He understood that some grief cannot be soothed with words. When they landed, a local officer drove them to a sheriff's substation on the outskirts of town. The building was a single-story brick structure surrounded by pine trees swaying in the coastal breeze. Inside, the air was cold and sterile. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. A deputy led them through a series of corridors to a back room where the evidence was being kept. Before they entered, Alvarez stopped Rachel with a gentle hand on her arm. "I need you to prepare yourself," he said. "What you're about to see will be difficult." Rachel nodded. Her throat was too tight for words. They put on sterile gowns and masks. Then they walked into the examination room. In the center of the room, on a large stainless steel table, lay a suitcase. It was medium-sized, square, and badly worn. The once blue material had faded to a grayish hue. The seams were warped and bulging from months of exposure to salt water and sun. A medical examiner stood nearby, waiting. Beside the table stood a weathered man in his 50s. His hands were rough and calloused. His skin was tanned from years on the water. The sheriff introduced him as Curtis Bannister, the fisherman who had found the suitcase. "I'm sorry about your loss, ma'am," Bannister said, his voice gravelly. "I wish I'd found something different that day." Rachel managed a nod. Then her eyes fixed on the suitcase. The medical examiner lifted the lid. Inside lay the badly decomposed remains of a small child. 10 months of drifting in ocean currents had left the body bloated, discolored, and partially skeletonized. But the child had been wrapped in layers of clothing that preserved some identifying features. Rachel gasped. Tears flooded her eyes. She saw a faded red Minnie Mouse t-shirt. It was the exact same shirt Millie had been wearing on the day she disappeared. Partially visible beneath the remains was a pair of blue swim goggles. On the side, faint but still legible, was the letter M. Rachel had bought matching sets for both twins. Millie's had an M. Rayleigh's had an R. "That's Millie's shirt," Rachel whispered, her voice breaking. "Those are her goggles." The medical examiner nodded solemnly. "We'd like your permission to take a DNA sample for confirmation." "Yes, of course," Rachel said. Then, more firmly, "But I don't need DNA to tell me that's my daughter." Detective Alvarez placed a supportive hand on her shoulder as the examiner continued. The examiner held up a separate evidence bag. Inside was a silver Zippo lighter, tarnished by seawater but still intact. Engraved on its surface were the initials KE. "This doesn't belong to my daughters," Rachel said. "They were 8 years old. They wouldn't have had something like this." "It's our first potential lead," Alvarez noted. "An anomaly that could help us identify whoever did this." Rachel turned to the fisherman. "Mr. Bannister, can you tell me exactly how you found this?" Bannister shifted his weight. "I was walking along the beach near my home, like I do most mornings. I noticed something washed up that didn't look like usual debris. When I got closer, I could smell. Well, it wasn't good. I opened it just enough to see inside. Then I called the police right away." "Was there anything else?" Rachel asked desperately. "Any sign of my other daughter?" Bannister shook his head. "Just the suitcase, ma'am."
I'm sorry.
Rachel turned back to Alvarez. "Why would someone put Millie in a suitcase and throw it into the ocean if they wanted to dispose of her? Why not something that would sink?" The sheriff interjected. "This style of suitcase is made of a material that becomes buoyant when submerged. If the perpetrator didn't weight it down properly, it would eventually float to the surface and drift with the currents." Rachel stared at the suitcase, trying to process the horror. Then she noticed something on the bottom of the lighter. A partially peeled price sticker with a store logo. It wasn't from a major chain. It looked familiar somehow, but she couldn't place it. "May I take photos?" she asked. "Of course," the sheriff said. As Rachel photographed the evidence, Alvarez discussed next steps with the local authorities. The case was being reclassified from a missing persons case to a homicide investigation. They would review cruise ship footage again. They would track down where the suitcase and lighter were sold. They would map ocean currents to determine where the suitcase might have been thrown overboard. Before leaving, Rachel made a request. "I'd like to visit the beach where the suitcase was found." Alvarez hesitated. "Are you sure that's wise?" "I need to see it," Rachel insisted. "I need to stand in that spot. I have to be strong enough to face this if I'm ever going to find Rayleigh." After a moment, Alvarez nodded. Curtis Bannister offered to take them to Ocracoke Island by boat. The journey took just under an hour. Rachel sat at the bow, her face turned into the salt spray. The wind whipped her hair. She didn't speak. She just watched the water and thought about Millie. When they arrived, Rachel saw a stretch of shoreline cordoned off with yellow police tape. Several officers moved methodically through the area, taking photographs and measurements. A news van was parked on a nearby access road. A reporter and cameraman stood at a respectful distance. Bannister guided the boat to a small dock. He helped Rachel and Alvarez disembark onto weathered wooden planks. Then he led them down the dock and onto the beach. "Right here," Bannister said, stopping at a depression in the sand. "This is exactly where I found it." The tide was going out, and it had just been left on the sand. Rachel crouched down. Her fingers dug into the cool, damp sand. She sifted the grains through her hand, as if searching for something, anything, that might lead her to Rayleigh. "There must be more evidence," she whispered. Alvarez knelt beside her. "The forensic team has been very thorough. This is a significant lead after 10 months of searching. We'll find her." A few feet away, the news reporter had noticed their arrival and was speaking urgently to her cameraman. Alvarez went to handle the press while Bannister stayed with Rachel. "There's a small cabin resort not far from here," Bannister said. "You could stay there tonight before heading back to the mainland tomorrow. The owner's right over there, actually." He nodded toward a middle-aged man standing with other onlookers beyond the police tape. Rachel wiped her eyes and stood up. "I think I'd like that. I don't want to leave just yet." "I understand," Bannister said kindly. "When my son went missing in a boating accident 5 years ago, I couldn't leave the harbor for weeks. Sometimes you need to be close to the last place they were." Rachel looked at him with sudden understanding. "Did you ever find him?" Bannister shook his head. "The sea keeps its secrets, but at least I know where to go when I want to talk to him." The cabin resort was simple but clean. Rachel's cabin had a queen bed, a small kitchenette, and a covered porch facing the ocean. 2 Adirondack chairs were positioned to watch the waves. Officer Martinez, a female deputy assigned to protect Rachel, took up a discreet position nearby. Rachel sat on the porch, watching the sun begin its descent toward the horizon. A young waitress brought her a mug of coffee. "Welcome drink on the house," she said with a sympathetic smile. "I'm so sorry about your daughter." Rachel accepted the mug with murmured thanks. She wrapped her cold fingers around its warmth and stared at the ocean. The same ocean that had carried Millie's body to this beach continued its eternal rhythm, indifferent to human tragedy. Then she noticed movement from the cabin directly across from hers. A man emerged, checking his pockets. He set his bag down on a small table outside his door while he locked up. Then he headed toward the resort's main office. Rachel noticed he had left something on the outdoor coffee table, a small metallic object catching the late afternoon sun. Curious, she walked over to check. It was a cigarette package and a lighter. She picked up the lighter and turned it over in her hand. On the bottom was a price sticker with a store logo. It matched the partial sticker from the evidence lighter. Rachel felt a chill run through her despite the warm air. She hurried to catch up with the man. "Excuse me," she called. "You forgot this." The man turned, surprised, then smiled. "Thanks. I would have missed that for sure." As he took the lighter, Rachel pointed to the sticker. "If you don't mind me asking, where did you get this?" "I collect vintage lighters, and I've been looking for this brand." "Oh, it's from a little magazine kiosk in Greenville," he replied. "Small place, but they've got all sorts of odds and ends." "Does it have a name?" "Carnes's Corner News, I think. It's run by this older guy who's always got some deal going on." "Why, you from around there?" "No," Rachel said, her heart beginning to race. "But there's a similar shop in Charlottesville where I live. It might be the same chain." Before the man could respond, a staff member approached them carrying a square suitcase identical to the one found on the beach. "Sir, are you sure you want to leave this behind? We found it in your cabin." Rachel's eyes widened. The suitcase was the same color, same style, same size as the one that had contained Millie's remains. "Where did you get that?" The question burst from her. The man chuckled. "Same place as the lighter. Actually, the kiosk owner in Greenville sold it to me for next to nothing when I bought the lighter. Used it once and the handle's already broken. Total junk. Shouldn't have wasted my money." "Would you mind if I had it?" Rachel asked, swallowing hard. "I know it sounds strange." "Take it," the man said with a dismissive wave. "Save me the trouble of disposing of it." "Thank you," Rachel said. "May I ask your name and contact information? I'd like to thank you properly." The man looked slightly confused but provided his details. His name was Jeff Thornton. Then Rachel took a deep breath. "I'm here with the police investigating my missing daughters. One of them was found in a suitcase just like this." Thornton's expression shifted from confusion to horror. "Oh God, I'm so sorry. I had no idea. I hope they find whoever did that. If there's anything else I can do to help." "Thank you for the information about the kiosk," Rachel said. "It might be more helpful than you know." Back in her cabin, Rachel immediately called Detective Alvarez. "I haven't left yet," he confirmed when she explained what she had found. "Stay where you are. I'll come to you." 15 minutes later, Alvarez arrived with Curtis Bannister. Rachel showed him the suitcase and described the lighter with its price sticker. The man said he bought both items from a magazine kiosk in Greenville called Carnes's Corner News. Alvarez's expression sharpened. "Carnes? That's interesting." He grabbed his radio. "I need all available information on a business called Carnes's Corner News in Greenville. Owner's name, address, business history, the works." While they waited, Rachel explained how Jeff Thornton had described the owner as an older guy who's always got some deal going on. If the suitcase matches the one Millie was found in, and the lighter has the same store sticker as the one with the initials KE, this can't be a coincidence, Rachel said. Alvarez agreed. "This could be the break we needed." The radio crackled to life. "Detective Alvarez, we've got that information for you. Carnes's Corner News is owned by Douglas Carnes, age 57. The business has 3 locations, one in Greenville, one in Charlotte, and a new location opening in Virginia Beach next month. Sending you the Greenville address and Carnes's home address now." Alvarez checked his phone. "It's late afternoon, but we still have some daylight left. Let's go check out this kiosk." They boarded the police boat and returned to the mainland. Once there, Alvarez requisitioned a police vehicle, and they drove directly to the address provided for Carnes's Corner News. The kiosk was a small standalone structure in a strip mall parking lot. Inside, a thin man in his 30s stood behind the counter, arranging a display of cigarettes. "Can I help you?" he asked. "We're closing soon." Alvarez showed his badge. "Detective Alvarez, Virginia State Police. Are you the owner of this establishment?" "No, sir. I just work here. Mr. Carnes is the owner." "Is he around?" "No, he's rarely here. He moves between the different locations, checking in maybe once a week at each place." "Do you have contact information for him?" The clerk hesitated, then produced a business card with a phone number and address. "Do you sell Zippo lighters here?" Rachel asked, stepping forward. The clerk nodded and gestured to a small display case near the register. "Right here. Got a few different styles." Rachel and Alvarez examined the lighters. They were identical to the one found with Millie, just with different designs and no initials. Alvarez showed the clerk a photo of the evidence lighter on his phone. "Have you seen this specific lighter before? It has the initials KE engraved on it." The clerk squinted. "We sell a lot of these, and customers sometimes get them engraved after purchase. But yeah, it looks like ours. Same brand, same model." "What about suitcases?" Rachel asked. "Do you sell those here, too?" The clerk looked confused. "No, ma'am. We're a newsstand, not a luggage shop." "The tourist said he bought the suitcase here," Rachel said. The clerk shrugged. "Maybe Mr. Carnes sold him one of his personal items. He sometimes brings in odd stuff to sell on the side. I don't ask questions." "Thank you for your help," Alvarez said. "If Mr. Carnes comes in, please don't mention our visit. It's important for our investigation." Back in the car, Rachel suggested they drive by Carnes's home address. "Maybe we can get a look at the place, see if there's anything suspicious." Alvarez nodded. "We can do a drive-by, but I don't have a warrant to search the property yet. We'd need more evidence to get one." They drove through a quiet residential neighborhood of modest single-story homes. When they approached the address listed for Douglas Carnes, they slowed down. The house was a pale yellow bungalow with white trim and a neatly mowed lawn. A car sat in the driveway, its license plate partially visible. "Look at that," Rachel said suddenly, pointing to the plate. "The first letters are DK, and the last two are KE." Alvarez frowned. "That's interesting, but we can't make assumptions. DK could stand for Douglas Carnes, but KE might be a coincidence." They watched the house for several minutes. There was no movement, no sign of activity inside. "I think we should head back to the station," Alvarez finally decided. "We need to coordinate with local authorities and develop a proper approach. If Carnes is involved in what happened to your daughters, we need to be strategic." Rachel nodded reluctantly.
I'm exhausted anyway.
"Could you drop me at the ferry station? I'll go back to the cabin for tonight." "I'd rather not have you take the public ferry," Alvarez said. "Officer Martinez can take you back in the police boat. It's safer and more discreet." They drove to the harbor where Officer Martinez was waiting with the boat. As they approached the dock, Rachel suddenly grabbed Alvarez's arm. "That car!" she exclaimed, pointing to a vehicle waiting in line for the ferry. "It has the same license plate, DK and KE." Alvarez followed her gaze. Through the tinted rear window, they could just make out the shapes of people inside. An adult and what appeared to be a child in the back seat. "That could be anyone," Alvarez cautioned. "Let's not jump to conclusions." But Rachel was already moving toward the ferry line. "I just want to see who's inside." "Rachel, wait!" Alvarez hurried after her. But before he could stop her, Rachel had reached the ticketing officer who was checking each vehicle before allowing it onto the ferry. As she approached, she saw the driver's window roll down to present tickets. In the back seat sat a child with an adult female. The child seemed agitated, squirming against the woman's restraining arm. From this distance, Rachel couldn't clearly see the child's face, but something about the girl's profile and hair color triggered a visceral recognition. "Rayleigh," she whispered. "That's Rayleigh." Detective Alvarez caught up to her, taking her arm. "You can't just approach random vehicles. We don't have enough evidence." "It's her," Rachel insisted, pulling away. "I saw her face for just a second. That's my daughter." Alvarez hesitated, then nodded to Officer Martinez. "Stay with Rachel. I'll speak with the ferry officer." He approached the ticket booth, speaking quietly with the officer. After a brief conversation, Alvarez returned. They're going to do a secondary check on that car, just to be safe. Rachel watched anxiously as the line of cars inched forward. When the target vehicle reached the checkpoint, the ferry officer signaled for it to pull aside for additional verification. Through the tinted window, Rachel saw the driver speaking animatedly on a cell phone. Then suddenly the car doors flew open. A man in his 50s emerged from the driver's side. A woman in her 30s got out from the back, pulling a young girl with her. "That's them," Rachel cried. "That's Rayleigh." The trio began weaving between the waiting cars, the man leading the way while the woman dragged the reluctant child behind her. Alvarez immediately radioed for backup. Suspects fleeing on foot at Ocracoke Ferry Terminal with possible kidnapping victim. Adult male, adult female, and female child approximately 8 years old. Request immediate assistance and perimeter setup. The harbor officer also radioed for additional security while Alvarez turned to Rachel. "Stay with Officer Martinez. We can't risk you getting hurt if they're dangerous." Before Rachel could protest, Alvarez was sprinting toward the fleeing suspects, drawing his weapon but keeping it lowered. "Police! Stop where you are." The man looked back, saw Alvarez, and redoubled his pace, shouting something to the woman that Rachel couldn't hear. Within minutes, the ferry terminal erupted into controlled chaos. Police cruisers converged on the scene, blocking exits. Officers on foot pursued the fleeing suspects. Passengers waiting for the ferry were directed to secure areas. The man was tackled by 2 officers as he attempted to scale a security fence. The woman, still gripping the child's wrist, tried to duck between parked cars, but was quickly surrounded by police with weapons drawn. "Let go of the girl," an officer commanded. The woman hesitated, then released her hold. The child immediately broke away, looking around frantically until her eyes landed on Rachel. Even from a distance, there was no mistaking the recognition that flashed across the girl's face. "Mom!" she screamed. "Mom!" Rachel broke free from Officer Martinez and ran toward her daughter. She dropped to her knees, gathering Rayleigh into her arms with a sob of relief and disbelief. "Rayleigh! Oh my God!" Rachel cried, holding her daughter tightly, feeling the girl's thin body trembling against hers. Rayleigh clung to her mother, sobbing incoherently. Alvarez approached them, his expression a mix of relief and professional concern. "We've got them both in custody. Rachel, we need to get you and Rayleigh somewhere safe while we process the suspects." Rachel nodded, unwilling to release her hold on her daughter. "Who are they?" "IDs identify them as Douglas Carnes and Kathy Evans," Alvarez replied. "Husband and wife, according to their documentation." Rachel's eyes widened. "Kathy Evans, the initials on the lighter." Alvarez nodded grimly. "We've impounded their vehicle and are obtaining a warrant to search it now. Preliminary inspection shows multiple suitcases in the trunk and some concerning materials in the back seat." Rachel looked down at Rayleigh, seeing her for the first time since their reunion. The girl was frighteningly thin. Her once fair skin was unnaturally tanned, as if artificially darkened. Her hair had been cut shorter than Rachel had ever kept it, and her eyes held a weariness that no 8-year-old should possess. "She needs medical attention," Rachel said. "An ambulance is already on the way," Alvarez assured her. At the hospital, doctors examined Rayleigh while Rachel paced outside the emergency room. When she was finally allowed in, Dr. Patel delivered the grim news. Rayleigh was suffering from malnutrition. She was significantly underweight for her age. There were multiple bruises on her back and legs, consistent with physical discipline from a narrow, flexible object like a rattan stick or thin belt. There were also marks on her wrists and ankles, suggesting she had been restrained for extended periods, possibly with chains or zip ties. Dr. Patel lowered her voice. "She appears extremely sensitive to bright lights and camera flashes. Based on her reactions during our examination and some comments she made, I'm concerned she may have been used as a model for inappropriate material." Rachel closed her eyes, fighting back tears. "What's the treatment plan?" "We'll start with addressing the malnutrition through carefully monitored nutrition. The sedatives in her system should metabolize within 24 hours. Physically, she should recover relatively quickly with proper care. The psychological trauma, however," Dr. Patel's voice trailed off. "She'll need specialized therapy. This kind of experience leaves deep scars. Rachel nodded, determination settling in her expression. She'll get everything she needs, whatever it takes. Later that night, after Rayleigh had fallen asleep, Detective Alvarez appeared in the doorway. He had updates from the interrogation. Carnes isn't talking much, Alvarez said. But Evans is cooperating. She's looking to cut a deal. What has she told you? Rachel asked. A lot. Carnes and Evans weren't acting alone. They were part of a larger operation that produces and distributes illegal magazines featuring children. Carnes would provide the children, and others would handle the production. Rachel felt sick. How many children are we talking about? Based on Evans's statement, we believe there are at least 10 others currently being held at a property Carnes owns under a different name. We've got teams moving on that location now. And what about my daughters? How did he get to them on the cruise? Alvarez sighed heavily. According to Evans, Carnes boarded the cruise under a fake name using a prepaid card and a burner email. He disguised himself as part of the ship's maintenance crew by stealing a uniform from a storage closet early in the trip. He also used a small electronic device to temporarily disable the security camera near where he took the girls. But how did he get them to go with him? My girls knew better than to go with strangers. Evans said he'd been watching them earlier on the cruise. He saw them enjoying one of the magic shows and used that to his advantage. When he encountered them alone, he performed a simple card trick he'd learned from watching the ship's magician. Once he gained their trust, he led them to a crew hallway where there were fewer cameras. Rachel closed her eyes, imagining her trusting daughters following a kind man who showed them magic tricks. And Millie? What happened to her? Alvarez's expression darkened. Evans wasn't there for that part, but from what Carnes told her later, he had originally planned to take both girls. But his partner at the time, not Evans, backed out when he realized they were twins. Apparently, keeping two children would have been too risky and complicated. So Carnes, Rachel couldn't finish. He suffocated Millie. No struggle, no blood, no noise. He wrapped her in her clothes, placed her in the suitcase, and disposed of it overboard that night from an unsecured deck area where waste is sometimes jettisoned. Rachel pressed a hand to her mouth, fighting back a sob. And Rayleigh? How did he get her off the ship? He kept her hidden in his cabin bathroom until they docked in Key West the next morning. He drugged her just enough to keep her compliant but responsive, and he threatened her about Millie. When they disembarked, he used disguises, sunglasses, a fake beard, different clothes, and exited during the early morning rush when most attention was on families with children. According to Evans, Carnes had prepared fake documentation for Rayleigh. They've been moving her between different locations to avoid detection. Rachel shook her head in disbelief. They were in Virginia before the cruise. Was he stalking us before this happened? Evans confirmed that Carnes traveled often and had mentioned seeing beautiful twin girls in Virginia that would be perfect for their next edition. We believe he may have spotted you and your daughters before the cruise and planned this specifically. Rachel felt a chill run through her. What about the lighter with KE on it? Was that intentional? Just a coincidence, apparently. Evans said it was her personal lighter that got mixed up with Millie's things when Carnes was rushing to dispose of the body. She'd been looking for it for months. The next morning, Alvarez returned with more news. A raid on another property owned by Carnes had rescued 3 more children. Some had been missing for over a year. Evans had given a full confession in exchange for leniency at sentencing. Carnes was still uncooperative, but with Evans's testimony and the evidence gathered, he was facing multiple life sentences. Rachel sat by Rayleigh's bedside as her daughter woke up. The girl's eyes fluttered open, confusion clouding them briefly before focusing on Rachel. "Mom," she whispered. "I'm here, sweetheart. You're safe now." Rayleigh's eyes filled with tears. "Millie? Where's Millie?" Rachel swallowed hard. She took a deep breath and took Rayleigh's hand in hers. "Yes, sweetheart. Millie is gone. The bad man hurt her very badly." Tears welled in Rayleigh's eyes. "I knew it. He told me she was gone. But I didn't want to believe him. I kept thinking she might be somewhere else like me. That maybe you'd find both of us. I wish we had," Rachel said, her own tears falling freely. "I looked for both of you every single day. I never stopped. I was so scared," Rayleigh whispered. "After they took us and Millie was gone, they kept moving me to different places. They changed how I looked. They made me stand still while they took pictures. And if I cried, they would hit me. They said if I tried to run away or tell anyone, they would hurt you too. Rachel gathered her daughter carefully in her arms. You were so brave.
So brave.
And you don't have to be scared anymore. Those people are going to jail for a very long time. They can never hurt you or anyone else again. For a long time, mother and daughter simply held each other, sharing their grief for Millie and their relief at being reunited. In the days that followed, Rachel learned the full scope of the horror. Carnes and Evans had been operating for years, abducting children from public places, parks, malls, even cruise ships. They had a network of buyers and distributors for the illegal materials they produced. The children were kept in hidden rooms, drugged, abused, and photographed. Some, like Millie, were killed when they became too difficult to control. The raid on Carnes's properties uncovered not only the 3 children rescued at the ferry terminal, but also evidence of at least 7 others who had been held over the years. Some had been returned to their families. Others, like Millie, had never made it home. Douglas Carnes was convicted on multiple federal charges, including kidnapping, murder, and production of child exploitation material. He received multiple life sentences without the possibility of parole. Kathy Evans, for her cooperation, received a reduced sentence of 25 years but would never be free again. The other members of the network were tracked down and arrested in a nationwide sting operation. The illegal materials were destroyed. The rescued children were placed in specialized care. As for Rayleigh, her road to recovery was long and painful. She underwent months of physical therapy to regain her strength and years of psychological counseling to process the trauma. She had nightmares for a long time. She flinched at loud noises and refused to be alone in a room with strange men. But slowly, with her mother's love and professional help, she began to heal. Rachel eventually moved out of their old home in Charlottesville. Too many memories. She bought a small house near the coast, where the ocean breeze reminded her of Millie, but also of the beach where her surviving daughter had been found. She planted a garden in Millie's memory, a circle of bright flowers around a small stone engraved with her name. Every year on the anniversary of the rescue, Rachel and Rayleigh visited that beach. They would sit in the sand, watch the waves, and talk about Millie. They would remember her laugh, her love of magic tricks, and the way she always finished her sister's sentences. And they would remind each other that even after the darkest night, dawn eventually comes. Final note for the YouTube audience. This story is a fictionalized account inspired by real-world horrors of child abduction and exploitation. While the characters and specific events are not real, the dangers depicted, stranger abduction, cruise ship security gaps, and the existence of criminal networks are tragically real. Always watch your children in public places. Trust your instincts, and never underestimate the evil that can hide behind a friendly smile and a simple card trick.